Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Thank you so much, Jami, for agreeing to come on the Always Andy's Mom podcast. I really look forward to talking to you today.
It is my honor. Thank you so much, Marcy. I want to start out by saying that you have really saved me, listening to your podcast and hearing about your Andy and how you've survived this and moved forward. And it's really, I was in the depths of despair. And about a month and a half ago, I found your podcast, and I'm still very early in my grief. And so listening to you and hearing that I might actually be able to move forward. And for several months, since I'm in acute early stages of grief, I have been isolating and I have been self-medicating, and those are not working. Those are not working. So I started listening to you and a couple of other grieving mother podcasts. And I really binge listened. And I just want to give you that credit out the gate here to say thank you, because I think you may have saved my life.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And one thing that I love that you said is that you said you have gotten some hope to move forward. And you didn't use the phrase move on, because everyone tells you, you need to move on. You need to move on. No, you don't need to move on, because move on, it sort of means you're moving past it. Mm-hmm. But when you move forward, you're moving forward, and the grief is coming alongside you, and the grief will always be there with you, and it's going to change and it's going to look different, but it's going to be alongside you. So we want to move forward, because I don't want to be stuck where I am forever. But moving forward is different than moving on or getting past it.
Thank you. And I'm learning, words are important, and I'm really learning terminology that is synonymous with healthy grieving, because, I'm only 8 months into to losing my son. And I have to tell you that I did try to listen to a couple of podcasts a couple of months ago, and it was a grieving mother podcast, and the people started laughing right off the bat. And I was so not ready to hear people laughing. Yeah. I lost my son. I'm coming here I want people to be like, I guess in the depths of despair, like me, I couldn't hear it. So it's really, that's why I hope one day I can come back and be on your podcast again, because I still have very much grief brain fog right now. So I'm hoping my thoughts will formulate and you guys can understand them. But it's just such a shock at first. And then you're in the depths of despair. And when do you come out of that despair? I think I heard you saying with someone a couple of weeks ago, so yes, you're hurting, but what are you going to do with the rest of your life? Like, how does your life look? And like I said, drinking IPA, sitting in front of my TV, just crying by myself is not working. And especially with my background in being a fitness instructor and a health coach and helping others, it's hard though to motivate yourself or anyone else for that matter.
Well, it's really hard too, because then you think, I've not just lost my son, I've lost myself.
Absolutely.
And that was a huge part, just a huge revelation to me, I think, thinking about, I didn't just lose Andy, I lost me. And who am I now? And then trying to even redefine yourself a little bit, because I'm not the same person I used to be. And I want to still like who I am. Mm-hmm. And especially in those early stages for me, when I had a lot of anger, I didn't like angry me. Yeah. Angry me is not who I am. I'm not an angry person. I'm a pediatrician, for goodness sake. Pediatricians are in general not real angry people. You picked the wrong career choice. So, but that's what I was feeling. It was hard to let go of that anger, but I needed to eventually to be able to kind of find myself again.
Well, that's encouraging, because I'm still very angry, very angry.
And that's totally expected. It took me a long time to let go of that.
And in
honestly,
the beginning,
over a year for sure.
Okay, good.
And you being at 8 months, I do want to tell you too that I felt like I was probably at about my low, and that's 6 to 7 months, because I hit 6 months and people start to forget a little bit, and they start to move on and think that you should too. And you just can't, because every second of every day is still different. And for you, even though for them, life has turned around and is pretty much back to how it used to be.
Yeah. And of course, I've heard you and your guests talk about this over and over, and how friends that you thought were just going to be right there by your side the whole time, and they're just kind of fallen by the wayside. And then a lot of people came out of the woodwork that I haven't seen in years, and they're here for me more than some of my closest friends. It's an interesting journey for sure.
Yeah. And I certainly didn't expect that at all either. Well, I really do want to start talking about Judson, because we have really taken a left turn here. I think good discussion, but I want to hear about your son, Judson, and all about his life.
Thank you so much. I want to start by saying that I have 2 children. I have my daughter, Candace, and my son-in-law, her husband, and my 2 kids, Jackson and Charlie, my 2 grandkids. And then Judson is my son, and he's my angel son. And he was 38 when he died.
Oh, you just froze. I hope you're coming back.
Oh. Uh-oh. Oh no.
Oh, there you are. You're back now.
It's weird. It's telling me it's on your end, but I don't know if that's true. Sorry. Can you see me? Oh no.
Okay. It says my internet is unstable now, so maybe it's me. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right.
Are we good? Hopefully we're good now.
Okay. Oh, darn it.
So it's okay. We edit.
Okay.
It's fine.
There we go.
So you were talking about you just said the word Judson and my son Judson, and then you froze. So
okay. So my son Judson is my angel child. He was 38 when he died, May 29th, 2021. And losing my son has been soul crushing. And but from the moment Judson was born, he was just this fun-loving, curious, gregarious, cutest little boy, jokester, super active, just a ton of friends. He was always on the go and just trying new things. He was really, really fun and curious, really curious. And so through grammar school, he played all the sports. He was a Cub Scout. He had a motocross bike. He snowboarded, wakeboarded, and he did all the things. And he was really a popular kid. Everybody really liked him. He was really fun. He was kind of like a leader, just a natural born leader. And his teachers would always say, if I can get Judson to do it, the rest of the class will. So I was really, really proud, of both my kids. It was just, we all love our kids and we think they're the greatest. So he really, really lived life to the fullest. And then around 13 or 14 years old, he started telling me that he wanted to have his own business one day, an apparel company where he designed his own line of clothing. Okay. And he was really interested in photography, and he had a really nice photography eye, and really creative. And so as he went through high school, I never stopped hearing about that. But upon graduation, he decided that, at the age of 19, he went and bought his own house. He didn't even tell us that he was buying a house. Just one day I came home and there was a message from a real estate agent on our phone, and he was buying his own house at 19. Now, this is probably because his father and we'd been married for a long time, and I was in the pre-stages of getting I was going to leave soon. And so I think my son kind of felt that, and it was a tense household. Right. So there was domestic violence, and I knew that when my kids moved out, I was leaving. So there was kind of that looming over the top of us. And I know I know my divorce had a really huge, heavy impact on both my kids, even though they were adults. And sometimes I think it's harder on adult kids, but
I think you're right. I think that can be the case. Yeah. Because they're not around enough to see.
It just, our house was the hub for friends, family, everybody. And then that kind of got, it totally changed. But so he bought his house, and then he decided he wanted to be a firefighter. and he went to Shasta College Firefighting Academy in Redding, California. And he graduated at the top of his class. And when it came time for the Master of Ceremonies to give out the awards, he would name the characteristics of the person and then name the person. And they were talking about the leadership award. And when they started naming the characteristics, I was like, oh, it's Judson. And sure enough, Judson got the leadership award. I mean, he was just, and then he immediately got hired by Cal Fire. And he just excelled. He excelled at Cal Fire. He had so many great friends. He had just this amazing, he was like a rising star. And I would hear stories from his captains. I've got so many notes and letters from Judson's performance and how he was just always an overachiever. He was happy to help. He was the best friend. He was in more firefighter weddings, either as the best man or a groomsman. I mean, he was that guy, that shining star. And he was really, really great at helping people with the dirtiest jobs. Like there was nothing he couldn't do. People used to call him MacGyver. And he would also have this, like he was kind of always looking for kind of a thrill too. He bought a street bike for a while and was racing around town. I was like, oh, that as a mother, as a mother, that's really hard. And, but he also had this real soft side. He was very sensitive also. So he was a real, he's like, let me jump into that fire. But he also was a very sensitive soul. And as a matter of fact, his niece and nephew, he would read them bedtime stories. He was so loving with them. And he would, keep them up past their bedtime and make forts and, and he could build uncle. Oh, he was, they loved him. And he was that guy that, hey, let's go build a tree fort. And he would build a structurally sound tree fort in one day. He was just incredible.
Yeah.
And the year after firefighting, he got married. And, and so then 10 years goes by. Right. And I noticed there was something there, how you can look back, hindsight is 2020, and you can go, so there was I just want to throw that out there. There was just this kind of like, is everything okay? Kind of thing. And in 2013, Judson joined a startup company. He moved to New Jersey for a minute. He was traveling all over the country, helping this startup company launch this software, and he loved it. And then he moved back to California, and that's when he started his photography business, wildly successful. And then he opened Maltese Militia, which was his firefighting apparel company.
Really?
Yes. And the kid.
And was he still working as a firefighter? Or
no, he ended up quitting because he was doing so well. He got to a point where, he always said his dream was to be his own boss.
Right.
And he loved it. He told me it was really hard to leave, but he stayed friends with all those guys. And they actually, they helped him as much as they could but they were all starting their families and everything. Now, the part of this story that I didn't tell you is that 2006, the year after he graduated from the fire academy, remember I said he got married? Well, 6 months into that marriage, his wife cheated on him. And they got divorced, and he was never the same after that.
Yeah.
And this story it's just so sad, because what happened is he was so depressed that he couldn't sleep at the fire station. So we're back now a year after he graduated, and he's working for Cal Fire full time, and he couldn't sleep because he was so depressed. And they're at the fire station, and he couldn't sleep. And then when you finally would fall asleep, if a fire bell went off in the middle of the night, they couldn't wake him up. And they literally had to kind of throw him in the truck, and he was slowing them down. And then he'd kind of finally wake up on the way there. And so his captain, who absolutely loved him, said, you need to get help. Right. So he went to the doctor, our family doctor, who had been our family doctor since my kids were born. And this is circa 2006. And my son said, before I was even done talking, he was already writing on his prescription pad, Adderall to wake you up, Ambien to put you to sleep, and an antidepressant. And there was one other. So this cocktail of drugs. Okay. Now this, I did not know this. I only found this out after what happened. So remember I said there was kind of a, during that 10 years, I started to go, where's my gregarious, fun loving, like, where's the sparkle in your eye? So I don't know that he had become addicted to Adderall. And I didn't know anything about Adderall. I did not know how highly addictive it is, and how if you continue to take it over a long period of time, especially, of course you build up a tolerance, and then you need more, and then you run out before, your prescription is due again. And so maybe you start seeking out other things, which is exactly what happened to my son. And so now we're in 2015, his business is wildly successful, and he moved his shop. He had to move it like 3 times just for, we don't even need to go into all of that. But he finally landed a really awesome shop that he could really crank the workout in. Unfortunately, he was so wildly successful that he got behind on orders and he couldn't keep up. Now he's already addicted to Adderall, which I did not know. I just knew he wasn't quite my same Judson, but didn't know. And then in 2016, I started noticing these just weird behavior changes. This guy who could work everyone under the table started kind of sleeping longer. He was getting home really late. He was sleeping longer. Now he owned his own home and he had rented it out. So since he had renters, he stayed with me for a while, which is, I was really able to go, whoa, this is crazy behavior. I started noticing things were starting to appear in my house or my yard. I had a big barn, and it had I had a small winery. I mean, not winery, but vineyard. And so I had just like some vineyard items in there and a lawnmower and, just rakes and shovels. And then I started noticing like stuff was appearing, junk. And I was like, Judson, what is all this stuff? It's junk. I mean, it is junk. And this behavior. And then he just started he would be angry. He would be mad if I questioned him. We couldn't sit down and have a conversation. And then 1 year later, March of 2017, you could have pushed me over with a feather, Marcy.
Yeah.
That's when I found out he was a full-on meth addict. And it had started the year before, or I guess a year and a half before, where he was so busy and wildly successful and staying up all night trying to finish his orders. And he had, people started getting mad because he wasn't getting done in time. And then he was having to refund money. And now he was making so much money, and now it was going down, down, down. So he started borrowing money from me. And then when I found out this happened, I was like, oh no, not my son, not this family, because we think it happens to other people. Right. And so I shut down. I had a very successful personal training and coaching business, health coaching business. And I literally shut it half down and just spent most of my time helping him researching addiction, researching Adderall, looking at all the side effects of Adderall and how meth, it's kind of like what the opioids are to heroin, right? And Adderall is to meth. You get the same, one is a downer, and Adderall and meth are uppers. And so for him to be able to stay up, he needed that upper. Plus he was already addicted to the Adderall, which I didn't know, which is why.
Well, that's so crazy to me that somebody just prescribed Adderall just to help you wake up. That's like insane. I don't understand that. Like, I mean, I put kids on it that have ADHD, obviously, and then we make them sign a contract. You don't sell it to anyone. You don't do anything. You don't this is for you because your brain and the way it works needs it to get it back to kind of a normal state.
Right.
This is not for somebody with a structurally more typical brain, to use as an upper, because it does have addictive qualities that can be, used, unfortunately. So that it appalls me that a physician would give this to a firefighter who can't wake up. Like, I don't understand that, especially in the state he was in. You send him to therapy. I mean,
this is where I really wish I could go back and do things over. I mean, we can always, I wish I would have done things. Of course, I didn't know, but Marcy, I have to tell you, speaking of this family doctor, when my son and I were finally able to talk about this, when I was helping him through his addiction, or at least I thought I was helping him, what I was really doing was enabling him. But when we were able to have a heart-to-heart talk, and he was really telling me this story, he said, Mom, he was known as the Adderall doctor to all. He said one gal that he had dated after he got divorced, she was like, oh yeah, he's the Adderall doctor. And he talked to a few, the firefighter, it's like, oh, they knew to go to him. And it really made, that's part of my anger right there.
Yeah, for sure. I can see that. Absolutely. I can see that. Oh, 100%.
So as the mother of an addict, and any mother out there who has gone through this knows exactly what I'm talking about, your life is turned upside down. You are insanely crazy. You are constantly, you never stop worrying and thinking, am I going to get that phone call? What's going to happen? And so after 2 years of trying really hard to help him, giving my money to him, and I'm not a wealthy person anyway, and I was doing this all by myself. I cashed in my retirement because I helped him to catch up on back rent. And he, when you own a business, you're constantly creating new vendor. I mean, you have all these vendors, to pay off. And I started helping with that. And then I started borrowing money from friends because I just knew that my son, my rock star firefighter, entrepreneur son, successful, was going to get through this. I believed that with everything I had. And unfortunately, I was going down right alongside him, mentally, spiritually, financially. And I just kept having hope. I just kept thinking, oh no, he's going to turn this around. And the bad part, this is something else that I'm kind of angry about, is I don't know if I wasn't looking in the right places or whatever, but I was listening to addiction podcasts at the time. I was calling anybody that I researched, and emailing and talking to people who were either former addicts or they ran addiction recovery centers. And I kept getting the same information. Oh, they just need to hit rock bottom. And okay, they're just when they finally make the choice that they want to be better. And I'm like, now I know that does not work. Rock bottom is now an outdated. It is not even on the table anymore in the newest research. And it is, because we all know there's three things for rock bottom. There's a jail. There's they're gonna maybe get better, or there's maybe ask for help and get better, and then there's a tag on your toe.
Right. That's the scary idea of letting them go to hit rock bottom, because rock bottom, you don't come back a lot of times. I mean, sometimes they do. And some of those people that you talk to, certainly, like, I hit rock bottom. Well, okay, then, and that was your rock bottom, right? That was what you decided was your rock bottom, but maybe somebody else decides that they can go lower than that, and then it ends up they don't recover from that. Right. So exactly.
Yeah. So that
I can see why that's hard.
Oh yeah. And then tough love. So then I'm mad at him. And
why can't you just
right. And so I couldn't, and he would not, he refused to go to rehab. He said, I am not losing my shop. I worked my whole life for this. I am not losing my shop. And so, Marcy, I made this, I was so out of it. I isolated myself. I did not hang out with my friends hardly anymore. The shame of addiction, right? The shame of mental illness. I was like, I didn't tell very many people. And so I was just like, unfortunately, after spending all my money, and I got to a point where I really needed to pay people back. And I was like, the only way I'm going to be able to pay people back is to sell my house and use my equity. So I did. My beautiful. I mean, it was very humble, but to me, it was beautiful. And I had a little bit of property and I loved that home. It was my mother's home. And so it was very sacred to me. And I made this hard choice and I sold it. And I moved 2 hours north to Ashland, Oregon, so that I could be far enough away from him that I would stop giving him every penny. And then what am I going to give him, a credit card next? I was that mom. I was that mom that my son, I'm going to save him. And so,
and you're thinking to yourself, he's going to see that I had to do this sacrifice and that's going to be what turns him around.
And
right?
I couldn't have been any further from the truth, because not knowing how insidious meth is, oh my gosh, he started going further downhill. In 2 years, I only saw him probably 3 times. And the last time I saw him, he just wasn't looking very good at all. Mm-hmm. And this man, my son was like a Greek god, like women couldn't not stare at him. He's so handsome. And he just had this beautiful body that he always took great care of. And he still looked actually really good, but you could see in his eyes, it's the eyes that are different. And the sparkle is gone and the smile is gone, And so anyway, I hadn't seen him in almost a year, because I realized my mental health and my physical health were going down, and I couldn't seem to get my feet back underneath me and recover. And I read this book called Don't Let Your Kids Kill You. Okay. And this man, I mean, it really helped it's a kind of, you could say maybe it's tough love, but there were nuggets that I got from the book. I don't agree with everything, but the nuggets that I got from that book that really helped me were: do not be mad at the child, be mad at the drug. Mm-hmm. Be mad at the drug. And so I was like, okay, so I called my son. I had tried to reach out to him many times, but he was really, really mad at me and wouldn't talk to me. And finally, so he died on May 29th. On May 25th, we finally talked. We talked for an hour. It was a great conversation. And he told me, Mom, I don't really believe in free will. I really don't. And of course, when your prefrontal cortex is not working, and anyway, it was a beautiful talk. And then I got a text from him, a really long text that night. If anything happens to me, da, 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 da. And I was just like, okay, wow. I'd not talked to him in a long time. So I kind of had the walls up and I was protecting myself again from hearing anything bad. But now this kind of opened up that whole, oh crap, now I've got my stomach's in knots again,
Right.
And so the next day we texted. And then, so the 29th was a Saturday, it was Memorial Weekend. So the 27th on a Thursday night, I called him and he answered, and he was like running. He's like, Mom, I got to go. Somebody's after me, and he was like, and he's like, somebody's chasing me or something. And I go, are you okay? And he goes, I got to go. And he hung up. And of course I'm just like, what is going on? And then I'm like, okay, wait, Adderall and meth make you paranoid and have delusional thoughts. And so texted him, nothing, texted him. And so Saturday morning, and remember, I'm 2 hours away, and I was, working full time now at the Ashland YMCA. And we were just doing all kinds of COVID masking issues. Yeah. And so I couldn't, it was one of those things where I was just like, but Saturday
I need to
morning,
leave. I can't leave. I need to leave.
Yeah.
I can't leave.
Yeah. Well, and he had said in that rushed phone call that he might try to come up to Ashland. So I was like, is he going to show up at my doorstep or,
right. Right.
And
then
so
you really don't feel like you want to go, because he could be there anytime.
Exactly. So Saturday morning, call him, and I leave him a message, and then don't hear back. And then I text him, nothing back. So then I called him again, and it went straight to voicemail. And I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
And so I called my friend, Tim is one of my best friends, who's a guy in Redding. And I said, Tim, I'm driving down. I'll be there in 2 hours. I need to go find my son. And he said, I'll go with you. So I picked him up. We went over to Judson's shop, and the door was locked, and I was pounding on the door. And then I mean, it literally looked shut, but I just kind of tried the door and it came open and I was like, oh
So it was
God.
locked, but not latched or whatever.
It was locked, but not latched.
Mm-hmm.
And because I thought, okay, if he doesn't answer the door, we're just going to drive around and look for him. Like I didn't know what to do. I was just going crazy. And so, but when that phone went straight to voicemail, my gut turned and I knew, Marcy, I knew right then something is terribly wrong.
Bad. Yeah.
And so I walked into his shop and it's kind of dark and dreary because there's not very many windows in there. And it's a huge shop. And I walked to where he had this loft. So I walked up the steps to the loft where he slept because he also lived in his shop at this point. He sold his house when the meth got, when the addiction got really bad, and he ended up selling his house. I mean, everything went down for him. I feel so bad for him. Yeah. And so I walk in and I walk up to the loft and I was like, walking up the steps really slowly, because as I crested the top, I'm like, please don't let me find him dead up here. Please don't let me find him dead up here. And I forgot to mention that when I walked in the door, when that door opened, sitting on a shelf right by the door was his cell phone and his keys. And I'm like, that is so not, he doesn't do that. He's never not with his cell phone ever. And so I walked up and I crested and I looked and he wasn't there. And I was like, oh, thank God. So I walked back down the stairs and I turned the corner and I had, two choices. I could go back out the door because I was yelling and he wasn't answering. And then his bathroom is in the very back corner. And I thought, oh God, please, is he back there? And it's kind of dark and I don't know if I want to go back there. And Tim had waited kind of outside or just inside the door. He didn't actually follow me all the way in. So I was kind of by myself. And I looked at that bathroom door and I thought, I've got to be brave right now. I've got to walk back there. I've just got to. And so I took like 3 steps and something caught my eye. It was hanging in front of me. And it was Judson. And I just screamed this guttural scream. And Tim goes, what? And I said, he hung himself. Call 911.
Oh, Jami. It's so strange how, you wrote to me and I knew that was the end of the story, but yet I so in my heart so desperately wanted it to come out different this time when you told it,
Me too.
Yeah.
And
I just can't imagine anything worse than finding that.
It's a parent's worst nightmare. It is the worst nightmare.
So funny because I hear people say it's a parent's worst nightmare. It's a parent's worst nightmare. And I see people on Facebook writing things, oh, it's a parent's worst nightmare. And I so often think, oh, but it's not. But yours, I really think is.
Thank you.
I really think it is.
I just, let me say 2 things. First of all, some of the police officers and some of the firefighters that came for the 911 call were his former buddies, and they got him down. And it was, in Reading that weekend, it was like 108 degrees. And I just sat outside his door. I wouldn't even stand up. And the chaplain came and she said, let's go in the air conditioned car. And I said, I am not leaving this spot. I am not leaving this spot until they bring my son out. And they rolled him out. And when they put him in the back of the coroner's van, I said, could I just go up and like touch his feet through the body bag, because the last time, it was just a surreal moment. And every time I would close my eyes, I didn't sleep a wink that night. And every time I close my eyes, and sometimes still, I see him hanging there, and it is the worst. But at the same time, Marcy, I'm so glad that I'm the one that found him. Yeah. It's kind of
it's weird
cruel,
kind of that way, isn't it?
A cruel beautiful thing at the same time. Glenn,
I'm with you in that. I mean, my worst memory for sure is turning my head after that accident when I came through and seeing him do CPR on my boy.
Oh,
and
mercy.
I'm just like you, that I would close my eyes, I would try to sleep, and that's all I could see. I could just see that scene again and again. And I do tell you that that does get better, that I don't see that as much anymore. So I can tell you that that will get better, but it is so hard. It is so hard.
Yeah. And I'm so sorry for what you went through. My gosh.
No, I know, but me too. Me too. It's horrible when you have that a kind of a traumatic scene that you then have to relive.
Yeah. And I often wonder though, is it worse to have not been there and have that wondering and when
wondering what you could have done?
Yes. I almost wonder if that's worse, and and there is Pauline Boss, Dr. Pauline Boss, she just wrote a book on there is no closure, the myth of or ambiguous loss, the myth of closure. And she talks about ambiguous loss, when maybe a person's not physically gone, but they're mentally gone. Like in the case of addiction, it's an ambiguous loss, or, maybe they're now, maybe it's the loss of a dream or whatever. But I think of that as being an ambiguous loss. If you didn't know, if you weren't there, if you had all these questions, I mean, I think that not knowing, I think it might be worse. So a lot of people will tell me, like, oh, it was awful that you found him. But I said there was no other.
But it's hard to get that phone call too, right? Because that was the other thing that could have happened. What could have happened is somebody else could have found him. You would have been having like a normal day just at work or whatever, and then have it be devastating. So what you had was obviously horrible. And obviously that scene in your mind is really terrible. But as you say, you did have the 2-hour drive where you're thinking to yourself, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. There's something wrong. Walking in, you had prepped yourself in some ways for the worst thing.
Yes. As
opposed to the utter shock of, I'm having a totally fine day, and then I get the phone call that changes your life forever.
And I just, for anyone listening that might have a child with addiction or a mental health disorder like anxiety or depression, I mean, so listen to your gut. So listen to your gut and follow your heart and do whatever you need to do. And I cannot imagine, because it was Memorial Weekend. Monday was a holiday, right? Mm-hmm. So, and it was 108 outside, and it would have been horrible on Tuesday. If the business owners next door, I cannot imagine. And so, and the beautiful part about me trusting my gut and really is that when my daughter and I got to go see him when he was before they cremated him, they allowed us to go in and see him, and he looked so beautiful, Marcy. They did such a beautiful job because his face is beautiful, and he was covered from the neck down, of course, but he had these beautiful, strong cheekbones, and of course his beautiful blue eyes were closed, but he had these beautiful lips and strong jawline, and he just looked like he was sleeping, and his lips were just in this almost a little teeniest bit of a smile, just not a smirk, not a smile, but just almost a little bit to where you were like, oh, he's at peace.
Right. Peaceful. Right. Yeah. That's what I was thinking as you were saying it. I thought,
and we both, my daughter and I both gave him a kiss, so I got to do that. And his funeral was standing room only, and they brought a fire truck, and, they just gave him, his friends talked, and people, I mean, it was amazing. It was an amazing tribute to his life. And so I just, right now, I mean, I've shut down my, my fitness business for now. And I put up a picture of me looking at all the pictures of Judson and on my page, and I just said, I can't, I'm in the depths of despair right now. I can't train anybody right now. But what my dream is to do something like what you're doing and help people, because I really want to shine a light on this, the way that we see people with mental health issues or mental health diseases and addiction and trauma and suicide, and so many people used to say suicide was such a selfish act, but my God, when you are on under the influence of a drug that was prescribed by your family doctor, and that you become addicted to that, there's a point where you're not thinking clearly. It's not your fault. It's the drugs.
No. And the mental state is just not what it should be in that moment. It's not. And you just can't put blame on people. You just can't. You can't. We don't know what's going on in other people's heads. You never know what's going on in someone else's head. But in that moment for him, he was just feeling such tremendous pain. He's not thinking about tomorrow or next week or anything else at that moment.
Right. And I've been really soaking up even more information about meth and Adderall, and there's a lot of research out there, and there is a gentleman that just wrote The Least of Us, and he's an investigative reporter, and I can't remember his name, but he has been studying this drug culture for a couple decades, and he said in about 2013 meth changed because as we started, the US and Canada started shutting down the home labs for meth that were blowing up neighborhoods and all of that. Back in the early 2000s, they started a campaign to shut down these labs. Well, as soon as those labs started to shut down, they did see a fall in meth addiction. And then in 2013, it starts spiking again because the Mexican cartel starts manufacturing it and bringing it over into the United States, which of course ends up in Canada also. And now meth, the way that they're mixing it now, it's 10 times worse. And where meth used to be like, hey, let's stay up all night and party not stay up all night. Let's get high and do an upper. And it was a party drug. After 2013, now it's an isolation drug. Now it's you take it and then that's why the homelessness is so pervasive. Also, everybody's in their own little tent, their own little space, and they go inside, they go do the drug together, and then they come inside. It's maddening. And it's just to think that every time I pass a truck or a car, I'm like, are you the person bringing the meth in? Is it, and no particular car, I'm not judging any, like, because we all know that the drug dealers make a lot of money. So is it a big truck? Is it a small truck?
Yeah, that's funny because you saying that, it made me think back to those early days after. So we were hit by a white BMW, and I hated seeing any white BMW ever. Like any white BMW was like, I wanted to, knock out the headlights. And obviously it wasn't the car, right? That car was totally destroyed. It wasn't, but in your mind, you get angry at objects sometimes in an irrational way. And so for you to be looking at trucks, like, that could be the one. I totally get that. Only yours is just a little more universal. At least I had only a white BMW, but.
Well, I say truck meaning like a big, semi truck. Like, do you have like lots of drugs in there, or do you have Amazon in there?
Right. You don't know.
And I think about when I moved up to Oregon, and I was constantly going back and forth through the border of California and Oregon. It's like, hey, do you have any fruit? Nope. Okay, bye. You go through this checkpoint, and there's no.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure if they suspect something, they pull you over, but it would be really easy to.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that would be regulated. Right? I don't know what the answer is. I don't pretend to know what the answer is, but I just know that,
I think it's frustrating too, isn't it?
It is.
When you don't know the answer, when you feel like this really horrible thing happened to me, and I really desperately want it to not happen to someone else, right? Because you're desperately not wanting it to happen to someone else. Look, but I can't really do anything to help prevent it from happening to somebody else. Exactly. That's so hard because that's not what you want, for sure.
Yeah. I know that prevention, education, teaching kids in school, and I know their Angela Connect is working on a curriculum to bring more awareness into the schools. And in one of the meth articles that I was reading up in Canada, they asked kids, did the DARE program work? You know, they would go interview kids 7 years after DARE, so they're like 21, and they said no, not at all. It didn't do anything.
I was going to say there's been plenty of research showing that the DARE program did nothing at all.
And and so they said what is helping is this storytelling and real world examples of people like us who have well, I shouldn't say us, you've lost your child, I'm sorry, I meant us because we're grieving mothers, but people who lose these. And I think every human being is beautiful, wonderful, amazing. You know, we all deserve a right to be here and to live. And so I don't.
But I think you're right. Emotional storytelling is so much more powerful. It is powerful.
It is. Every time I drive by a homeless person, I just look at them and I go, God, what happened to you? What happened? Yeah. They say the opposite of addiction is connection and needing help. And I really wish I had, I really wish I would have manhandled my son. I wish I would have gotten his firefighter buddies together and just said, okay, we're forcing you into rehab, because he wasn't going to go to rehab. He just wasn't going to do it. I'm not going to leave my shop. He was so stubborn, and he had a lot of pride because he had early success in life, and you know, and he had a huge retirement. I mean, I can't believe how much that kid saved, and he made so much money on his business, and it's all gone. And then he was borrowing from me too. It's just unbelievable the way that drug affects the brain, and they really think when they're under the influence that they're right, you know, and that those garbage type objects that they bring into the home or into the, you know, garage, or they start collecting things. And I spoke with a high school friend who, he told me he was addicted to meth for like 2 years, and he said, oh, you see an old toilet seat and you're like, ooh, I'm going to fix that. And he said, you go dumpster diving and you grab things and you're like, because in their brain, the drug has this effect on them that makes them think it's valuable.
Yeah, and that they can do all this stuff, and they'll be able to do all this.
So a year before he died, knowing that all of my research showed that a holistic approach to healing addiction, just like healing anything, really, it's all the same, you know, great nutrition, great sleep, and yoga, exercise, meditation. And I've been a fitness instructor my whole life, but I was cardio kickboxing, you know, Mach 2 with my hair on fire, never wanted to slow down, hated yoga. So a year before he died, I was like, okay, if yoga is a healing modality, I am going to learn how to teach yoga. So I did the 200-hour certification. Hated it. I was bored. I was like, when are we going to start kicking some, you know, punching something or kicking something? And but a strange thing happened after teaching for about 2 months. I started just one day I walked into my house and I was like, oh gosh, I feel good. Something, you know, and even I'm still suffering because Judson's still an addict and I was still in that place, but I was like, oh, it's the yoga. Yoga is actually helping me. And I was only doing a half-hour session, you know, because of my schedule, I couldn't teach more than a half hour. And a half an hour, a couple of times a week was really helping me. And I was like, I need to share this with my son, which is why I became certified in the first place. And I'm really sad that I never got the opportunity to do that, you know, to share it with him. Not that he would have done it, but it was the one thing that I could do. You know, how am I going to make any sense or make anything good come of this thing that I've gone through with my son, because watching your child suffer is the worst thing in the world. They say you're only as happy as your saddest child, right? And so my dream, once I can get my brain, I mean, you can probably tell my brain is just still all over the place, but once I can get myself to where I feel like I can function again, that's my dream, is to turn my website now into like what you have been done with Andy's mom, and help grieving parents and help people to get through this addiction journey. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I do want to bring up that you made a really good point. And I always, when people come to me, bring their kids to me when they've been to counseling, and they say, we need to start on some medication, an antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication. And I always say to them, I hold up my hand and I say, I can give you medication. This is 1/5 of what you need to do. This is only one thing, because this is not going to make you better. This could get you from here to here, but it's not going to get you to here. So I need you to continue going to counseling, or start counseling on some people that haven't, because I won't put anyone on medication who's not in counseling. And you need to get good nutrition. You need to get good sleep, and you need to get yourself moving and get some exercise. And you have to do all 5. And if you don't do all 5, like we're not going to get you where you need to be. So I think that's important. And I'm glad to bring it up here, because I do want people, and I think even in a grieving community, which I've not been doing the best job myself, I have to admit this, of looking at my hand and making sure I'm doing everything that I should be doing, because I need to be looking at my nutrition more. I need to be moving more. I need to be doing all those things more. But thinking back on, that's what you want to think to yourself, that even if you are really doing poorly and you are on some medication, think of that as 20% of your treatment and not 100. Because if you start thinking of it as 20% of your treatment, I think you will be in a better place than if you think that medication is going to get you the whole way.
Yeah. That's brilliant. And isn't it interesting that it's not just the holistic approach for depression or addiction. It's just life in general, and happiness, and diabetes or whatever the ailment is. Really, if you can have, those 5 things, and even maybe if you don't need the medication, adding meditation instead of medication,
that's just good too. Because right now I'm not on medication. So I got to say I'm back to 4. So if we want to move meditation in as my 5th, I love it, because it gets me using the hand analogy again.
And so, and I think something that really gets people stuck, and I know we're getting close here, but is with fitness. And I found this being a health coach for so long, a couple decades, is that people think, okay, I have to exercise for an hour, or I have to meditate for a certain amount of time, or I have to do an hour and a half of yoga to benefit. And it's simply not true. You can do so much in 5 minutes. And that's where I recommend people even start if you're just beginning. I mean, we had to, roll over before we learned to crawl, and crawl before we sat up, and sat up before we walk, and walk before we read. It's the same thing with anything new that you do. And I decided to do a trauma-informed yoga certification. And so I started that to also help people. This is before Judson died also. And I only have 20 hours left. And when he died, I just keep putting it off, because I don't want to get in front of a camera, because my 20 hours remaining are to teach yoga classes. And that will be free to the public. So that will go on my website when I finally get the wherewithal to do it. I don't know when that will be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know you will. I do know you will. And I think you will be able to help people in really beautiful ways. I can just see that already. I can sense that from you, that what you have to give is amazing. And it's hard. It's hard sometimes to hear that. I know, because I have a hard time hearing that, because I think to myself, what ends up happening in your head is you think, well, then somehow I'm saying it's okay that Andy died in some way, because I'm making all this good come from it. No, that's not what we're saying here. What we're saying is, in spite of that,
Mm-hmm.
in spite of the horribleness of losing Judson, I can still do something beautiful.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's where I think you will end up being when you are ready,
Thank you.
is despite this horrible experience that you have had, beauty will come.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Marcy. That's well put. And I, if I could help even one person not go through what I went through, it would be worth it.
Yeah.
This living hell has been just devastating. And yeah, I, somebody that I listened to the other day said, can you alchemize this pain into something good? And it's still pretty early for me,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
that's my dream. And
Yeah.
that I'll get my website going again and help others. And I want to hold grief meetings, and because it's really interesting, isn't it, how the grieving parents is awesome to connect with them, but then finding somebody who's grieving kind of the same type of grief that you are, or the kid was at the age that there's something about, okay, then also going out and really finding people that you can really, really relate to and share. Because my son was 38 years old, and I look at my life, I'm 59, and I look at my life and I go, oh, this is my life. I will never see my son again on this earth. And I think there's just so much to this grieving process, and we need help. We need each other.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing today. I really enjoyed it.
Me too. And you're so welcome.
Thanks for listening to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. Please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. We are always looking for new show ideas. If you'd like to be a guest, know someone who'd be a great guest, or have a show idea, please email us at marcy@andysmom.com. Be sure to visit the webpage, andysmom.com, for more content, including Marcy's blog. There you can also sign up to receive updates via email. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.